Paul Charlton, let's talk about the legal aspects of this. Do you think that we would see another indictment this week? She's presenting the case today. There are 2 more witnesses, tomorrow. And it's unusual to a lot of us who have followed the federal cases more than the state case to have witnesses appearing before the grand jury as an indictment is, being presented to them when presumably it's already written. So where do you see the timeline here first?
It could be that she's getting ready, Andrea, to present the indictment now before the grand jury and ask for charges. Remember, too, though, that she had and put to good use an investigative grand jury in which she called scores of witnesses to come before that grand jury and present evidence. And there were a number of court fights from individuals who declined initially to appear before that grand jury. So now she has in her hands that grand jury testimony. She can use that grand jury testimony here. She can use witnesses to come back in again. So it wouldn't be out of the ordinary that an indictment comes very soon. What the big question is against whom might these charges be brought and exactly what charges will she be bringing?
And Paul, we did hear from the foreperson of that special grand jury, and probably, hinting at not only multiple indictments, but that, it was going to be the former president. Do you have much doubt? And if so, have he or his lawyers been warned?
It wouldn't surprise me if it did include the president. In fact, it would be a surprise if the president wasn't included. And we know the president's lawyers have been included because they have attempted multiple times to go before the judge who is overseeing this grand jury investigation to stop or to slow this grand jury investigation. And the tool that Fani Willis has in her hands that I think lends credibility towards the idea that the president is going to be charged is that she herself is experienced in using the RICO laws, the Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organization laws, modeled after the federal statutes that federal prosecutors use to take down the mafia. The state in Georgia has a more liberal, if you will, a broader, expansive, and a more broad view of what RICO laws are. And we can expect that among the charges, we may very well see RICO charges that have at the very center former President Trump as the individual organizing the attempt to overthrow or to throw out the legitimate election that put President Biden in the White House.
And that is a very powerful prosecutorial tool, almost unique to Georgia in the way it's applied. Vaughn Hillyard, you've had a busy week. You've been in Iowa. Now you're at the center of the action in Georgia. So talk to me about the former president's mood. You talked to him over the weekend, and then he was on social media going after the federal judge in Washington, even after that protective order had been, issued on Friday, warning him not to.
Right, Andrea, you just said it. So often criminal defendants or potential defendants go quiet at the advice of their lawyers. In this case, Donald Trump is not only going to the Iowa State Fair, as he did on Saturday and publicly speaking, but also actively over the last couple of hours here on this Monday, posting to his social media account related to both of these cases here. We have to go first back to Friday, and it was that hearing over the protective order when Judge Chutkan, who is overseeing the federal charges related to the efforts to overturn the election in 2020, told Trump's lawyers very explicitly at that hearing, quote, "I caution all of you and your client, therefore, to take special care in your public statements about this case. I will take whatever measures are necessary to safeguard the integrity of these proceedings." By this weekend, Donald Trump was posting not only a picture of Judge Chutkan on his social media account, but also calling her a left-wing Obama activist, and also claimed that the protective order was an admission on her part of running an election interference campaign against him, directly taking on Judge Chutkan despite that protective order and despite her own warnings in that hearing. And as it relates to this Fulton County ongoing investigation and the potential grand jury's vote to charge Donald Trump tomorrow, just in the last 2 hours, Andrea, Donald Trump on his social media account went on the attack against former Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, who, under subpoena this weekend, is set to testify before that grand jury tomorrow. Donald Trump in his social media post explicitly said that, quote, he shouldn't testify. Of course, in Georgia criminal statute, there is a law in which witness influencing could be found to be a criminal act on the part of Donald Trump. This is active This is ongoing here in real time, Andrea.
And to that point, Paul, I mean, he's a candidate for president. He's making free speech arguments in the federal case in D.C., his lawyers are, as a defense. So, you know, how difficult would it be for this judge, the federal judge, who is a no-nonsense judge by all reports, to crack down? I assume that would be to call the lawyers in. Would there be a warning? You know, how will she be able to control his behavior online?
Andrea, she's already issued an order that says, and I think it's smart, if we continue to hear what she considers to be conversations, dialogue from the president, or threats or opinions given by the president that hinder in some way this prosecution, she's going to accelerate the trial date. That's a very good and powerful tool. But turning back to Georgia for a moment, Andrea, it is extraordinary. It's amazing to me that if you are under investigation for an attempt to interfere with a lawful election, that you then attempt to interfere with the appearance of a grand jury witness, that's a bad look. And that evidence goes right into the hands of the prosecutor. He is making Fani Willis's day. She is building her case. He is helping her. And that is one of the many factors that must make former President Trump one of the most difficult witnesses in the country.
Could she add a charge of potential witness tampering?
She most certainly could, and she can use it as evidence to show that this is part of the former president's pattern and practice in a RICO prosecution. When he attempted to interfere with the election, if those are the charges she brings, she can also talk about how it is he attempted to interfere with the appearance of a witness who had received a lawful subpoena.